But first, let's go to our top story. And it jumps back into a courtroom where broker liability in a trucking accident is being debated. John Kingston, our editor-at-large, joins us now to talk about it. John, another page in this legal battle back and forth to see if a broker essentially is liable in a fatal or at least an accident that has catastrophic consequences.
Yeah, there's a big win for the brokers. It was a case involving Coyote Logistics. It also had the sort of unique spin on it that it also involved double brokering, though the double brokering doesn't seem to have taken into account. It really wasn't a factor in the final decision. So let's lay out the case here. We've had several cases here where a broker has hired a carrier and something bad happens. An accident, in one case, somebody was left a quadriplegic. Another one, somebody was killed. In this case, 2 people were killed. So Coyote hired a company named Gulf Transportation, which double brokered it into a company called, I believe it was O'Reilly. There were multiple drivers in it, but the key thing here is that the driver who was carrying the cargo, which was soup between Oregon and upstate New York with a stop in Chicago, got into a fatal accident. 2 people were killed. Lawsuits were filed, and Coyote was made a defendant. Coyote argued that the Federal Aviation Administration Authorization Act, the legendary F4A, which is intended to keep states from passing down regulations that affect federal deregulation of trucking, that they were blocked from being prosecuted or being a party to this suit under F4A. They won. They won in a case in the Middle District of Illinois. So this is there have been far more victories for brokers on this issue than there have been defeats. However, there is out there the one very large, significant defeat in the case of Miller versus C.H. Robinson. Miller versus C.H. Robinson, which was a loss for Robinson, was put before the Supreme Court, requested certiorari in the same batch of requests that included AB 5. So that would have been June 2022. The Supreme Court denied certiorari. We recently have had a case known as the Yee case, where the widow of somebody who was killed by a truck, sued the broker. The broker was Global Trans. The Global Trans was ruled to be not a correct party to it because of F4A. The appellate court upheld that. Now the legal industry that deals with 3PLs is looking at yet one more conflict here. You've got Miller versus Robinson, which is a loss for brokers, and you have the Yee case, which was a win for brokers. And what they're hoping, and the Yee case, I've just learned this, and I just added this to our story this morning. The Yee case was submitted for certiorari before the Supreme Court about last week. Okay, so or 2 weeks ago. So what this means is that the Supreme Court now has 2 cases where the circuits are in conflict with each other over broker liability and F4A. So what the sort of transportation bar is hoping for here is that there will be that the Supreme Court will take this up and settle this once and for all. We may have to wait till June to see that. As you know, a lot of these certiorari requests just sort of hang out there and get acted on in the final days of the court's term. So anyway, that's a lot going on, but I can tell you that the brokerage industry considers this issue to be existential.
So, of course, it has massive impacts depending on what the Supreme Court decides to do, whether they take it up or not take it up. But I want to double click on that double brokering issue, because as we've talked about this a lot, obviously double brokering is something that is a problem in our industry. But as we know, it's not necessarily trackable and punishable by actual criminal activity. When we see this now be put into a case where we're talking about broker carrier liability, is that maybe an avenue for this issue of double brokering to actually be looked at underneath potential criminal activity and fraud? And could that maybe play into a role of the liability here?
I don't think so. As I read this, if I extracted all the parts from it, all the things in the decision about the second company, O'Reilly, and let's say that stuff just disappeared, and Coyote had brokered the load to Gulf Transportation, and Gulf Transportation was involved in the accident, I don't think there really would have been any difference. But I have to tell you that the reading in the case of what happened with the double brokerage just leaves your head spinning, because there's 2 drivers involved. There's only one driver involved in the accident, but there's 2 drivers involved in moving the freight, and nobody's ever heard of them. Okay. it's just a mess. And Coyote didn't find out about the accident for 2 weeks, and companies are claiming to never have heard of this guy or this company. It's sort of amazing that the freight ever got. Well, I don't know if it did get there. Of course, it was an accident. It's amazing that the freight ever made it as far as it did. Let me say that there's really no allegations here of criminal activity. I mean, double brokering is not necessarily illegal. I mean, if you broker if you're a broker and you broker a load into me, and then I turn around and give it to somebody else, okay, that may be in violation of my contract, then I'm not allowed to do that. Maybe I didn't properly inform you of it, but it's not per se illegal. Nothing got stolen here, nothing like that. So this was a double brokering that shows, if not necessarily illegality, just an incredible amount of disorganization. And you look at the visibility industry in trucking, and you can see why it's needed, because I got the sense that there were times that Coyote didn't even know where this truck was. And so it's almost sort of, I'm almost like a comic relief in reading some of this, but I really don't think it had much to do with the final decision. This is the final legal decision regarding broker liability.
John, I think it's interesting that F4A is not a new law. So this is not something that's just kind of come up and we're just trying to decide this now. It's been around for quite some time. But as you look at this, again, there are little bits of ambiguities here between C.H. Robinson, between Coyote, between the Yee case, slight differences here and there. Are we really getting it down to just splitting hairs at this particular point, and we need a high court to figure it out? Because there are intricacies in each case that makes each one a little bit different.
All right, I haven't read the Miller versus Robinson case in a while, so I'm pulling from memory here. But there is also something in F4A called the safety exception, which basically means that F4A does not protect the broker or others, or the trucking company, the carrier, whatever, does not protect the carrier from state prosecution if they do something really egregiously wrong. In this case, the court said, well, the safety exception doesn't apply to Coyote because Coyote is not a motor carrier, and the safety exception is to be applied only to motor carriers. So I'd almost have to go back and look at why Miller versus Robinson was found in favor of Miller and not in favor of Robinson. But the bottom line is that's out there as a case that the brokerage industry considers to have a grave threat if that becomes kind of like the overriding precedent. Where all these other ones like Yee, like Coyote, there's a case involving a theft of cargo involving Landstar, which also involved F4A. That's another one. You read it and you wonder, how does cargo ever get to where it's going? Just crazy. And those are all in favor of the brokerages. So, yes, I do think the 9 ladies and gentlemen in the Supreme Court might want to settle this one out.
And, of course, we're going to have to wait until summer 2024 to figure that out. John Kingston, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you as always, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's move over to the wall for our first carrier update of the morning.